Act 3, Scene 1, the Royal Palace at Forres, entering Banquo. Now, this is important because we're going to hear what Banquo is really feeling about Macbeth and the suspicions, in fact, that he has of Macbeth. Thou hast it now, King, Cawdor, Glamis, all, as the weird women promised, and I fear thou placed most foully for it. Now, underline that. I fear thou placed most foully for it. So he has his suspicions that maybe Macbeth was responsible for the murder of the king. Now, in the very last scene, we had Macduff raising these suspicions too. So the net is sort of kind of beginning to close around Macbeth. Yet it was said, it should not stand in thy posterity, meaning, but it was said that it wouldn't be much good to you because you wouldn't have a lineage, i.e. your sons and your sons would not be kings. But that myself should be the root and father of many kings, if there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine. Why, by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well, and set me up in hope, but hush no more. So the prophecies are sort of getting a little bit more in on Banquo than they had been previous. Of course, because Macbeth has gone ahead and become king, he's saying, maybe at some point in the future, a long time from now, I might be the father of kings. And at this moment, the Senate is sounded, entering Macbeth as king, Lady Macbeth as queen, Lennox, Ross, lords and attendants. And Macbeth says of Banquo, or to Banquo, here's our chief guest, and Lady Macbeth. If he had been forgotten, it had been a gap in our great feast, and all thing unbecoming. So Lady Macbeth, always the hostess, and always being able to put on the greatest show. Macbeth says to Banquo, tonight we hold a solemn supper, sir, and I'll request your presence. So this solemn supper is a supper with all the thanes, the chief thanes of Scotland, and it is to cement and augment his kingship following the coronation at Scone. Banquo says, well, let your highness command me upon me, to the which my duties are with most indissoluble tie forever knit. So he couldn't be more loyal to Macbeth here in this moment. He's saying, look, yes, even though he may have suspicions about him, he's saying, look, yeah, I am loyal to you and we are forever knit. Macbeth asks, ride you this afternoon? So are you taking out the horse this afternoon? Aye, my good lord, Macbeth, we should have else desired your good advice, which still hath been both grave and prosperous in this day's council. So otherwise I would have liked to have chatted with you, but we can do that another time. Tomorrow, but we'll take tomorrow. Is it far you ride? Are you going far? Banquo, as far, my lord, as will fill up the time twixt this and supper. Go not my horse the better, I must become the borrow of the night for a dark hour or twain. So I'll go as far as I can between now and supper time, and I'll even speed on my horse if it needs be. And Macbeth says, put an I for irony here. Fail not our feast. So make sure you're back for our feast. Banquo says, my lord, I will not. And Macbeth says, we hear our bloody cousins are bestowed in England and in Ireland, not confessing their cruel parricide, but filling their hearers with strange invention. So he says, I'm hearing rumours from England and from Ireland, i.e. from Malcolm and from Donalbain, that the courts are being filled with rumours about how their father was killed, i.e. that they don't believe it was the Chamberlains. But of that tomorrow. When therewithal we shall have cause of state craving us jointly. Hie you to your horse. So enough of that. Go on to your horse and have a nice journey. Have a nice afternoon. Adieu until you return tonight. Very importantly here at the end, underline this. Goes Fleance with you? So is your son Fleance going with you? Banquo, aye, my good lord. Our time does call upon us. Macbeth says, well, I wish your horses swift and sure of foot, and so I do commend you to their backs. Farewell. So exits Banquo. And Macbeth speaks to the attendants. Let every man be master of his time till 7 at night, to make society the sweeter welcome. We will keep ourselves till supper time alone, and then God be with you. So exits all but Macbeth. He's just told them all to have free time to do whatever they want until 7 this evening. He is going to be alone until that moment, and then they can all get together for a joyous feast to celebrate the new reign. Exit all but Macbeth and a servant. Sirrah, a word with you. Attend those men upon our pleasure. So he's asking his servant, are those men outside that I requested? So he's not intending to spend his time alone. In fact, he wants to speak to some gentlemen who are standing outside the castle. Servant says, they are, my lord, without the palace gate. Macbeth says, bring them before us. And the servant exits. And now we hear something really important. What is going on inside Macbeth's mind when everybody else is gone and it's just him and his thoughts? So the audience gets to see what's really, really affecting Macbeth. To be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. Highlight that. I don't feel safe in my kingship. It's not enough to be the king unless I can be safely the king. Our fears in Banquo stick deep. Can you write down there? Paranoia. Now this is the beginning of a very paranoid road for Macbeth, but he is very worried about Banquo for two reasons. Banquo was witness to the great prophecies, and also he was promised great things. So we're going to look at both of these things in this very famous soliloquy now. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be afeared. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he hath a wisdom, and doth guide his valour to act in safety. So he's worried that Banquo is a very noble guy who can't be manipulated. He's not malleable. His conscience isn't malleable. There is none but he whose being I do fear. Highlight that. I'm afraid of Banquo. There is none but he whose being I do fear. And under him my genius is rebuked. Highlight that as well. Under him, everything that I've achieved by becoming king, it is rebuked. Because the witches promised that his children would be kings. So whatever I achieve here in this world, it's rebuked. And as it is said that Mark Antony's was by Caesar. So quoting from a very, very strong source there, Mark Antony and Caesar. He chid the sisters when first they put the name of king upon me and bade them speak to him. So he's saying, well, he was interested enough that he wanted to hear what prophecies were in store for him. And then prophet-like, they hailed him father to a line of kings. Now, I want you to really look at the second part of this soliloquy. It's so, so important. I nearly know it all off by heart. It shows that Macbeth is going down a road of paranoia that is so familiar. Like if we look at the Nazi regime and how Hitler bit by bit became more and more paranoid and started to assassinate all of those in his closest circle. Upon my head, they have placed a fruitless crown, meaning I am king. The witches have placed this fruitless crown above my head and put a barren sceptre in my gripe. Thence to be wretched with an unlineal hand. So what good is it to me if my sons and their sons won't be kings? And as it stands, Macbeth has no heirs. No son of mine succeeding. If it be so, for Banquo's issue, I have filed my mind. Highlight, very important quotation there. And it shows an avenue or a tunnel that Macbeth has gone down. For Banquo's issue, I have filed my mind. Like I have ruined my life. I have destroyed the peace of my brain. For Banquo? Well, nobody asked him to do this. And now he's saying, I have done all of this for Banquo. As in, I cannot be happy. And we're seeing a real sense of dissatisfaction here. For them, the gracious Duncan have I murdered. So underline that and highlight that as well. So again, the same idea. I have killed the gracious Duncan for Banquo's family. Put rancors on the vessel of my peace. So I've imprisoned my heart to this eternal fear and and damned paranoia for them, only for them, and mine eternal jewel given to the common enemy of man, to make them kings, the seeds of Banquo kings. Rather than so, come fate into the list and champion me with the utterance. Who's there? Enters a servant with 2 murderers. Now go to the door and stay there until I call. The servant exits. And he asks, and then Macbeth speaks to the first murderer. Was it not yesterday we spoke together? And the murderers speak together. It was, so please your highness. So why has Macbeth got murderers coming to visit him on the quiet? We're going to see very shortly that Macbeth is beginning to establish what will become a full reign of terror, and the paranoia is seeping deeply, deeply within him at the moment. Macbeth says, well then, now you have considered my speeches, know that it was he, in the past times, which held you so under fortune, which you thought had been our innocent self. This I made good to you in our last conference, passed in probation, which how you were borne in hand, how crossed the instruments who wrought with them, and all things else that might to half a soul and to a notion crazed say, thus did Banquo. So, in a nutshell, to go through this shortly or gingerly, Macbeth yesterday, when he met with these murderers, explained to them that, over the years you've been badly marginalised and you have been put down and people have conspired against you. You thought it was me. But all along, in fact, it was Banquo. So I hope now you realise that it was Banquo and not me. The first murderer says, yes, you have made it known to us. Macbeth says, I did so and went further, which is now our point of second meeting. Do you find your patience so predominant in nature that you can let this go? So do you gentlemen find that you can let this information go? This man, Banquo, has been keeping you down for years. He doesn't go into specifics as to how Banquo has been keeping them down, but these are marginalised men who make their living as murderers and in the crime world. So he's trying to say that it's all been on Banquo, that they've been pushed onto the margins in the first place. Are you so gospel to pray for this good man and for his issue, whose heavy hand bowed you to the grave and beggared yours forever? So don't be trying to, are you so good that you won't be interested in hurting a man who has kept you down and also your issue, your children and your children's children forever? And the first murderer says, we are men, my liege, meaning like, no, we are not going to accept this. Macbeth, aye, in the catalogue you go for men, as hounds, as greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, curs, shows, water rugs, demi-wolves are clept, all by the nature of dogs. And valued file distinguishes the swift, the slow, the subtle, the housekeeper, the hunter, everyone according to the gift which bounteous nature hath in him closed, whereby he does receive particular addition from the bill that writes them all alike, and so of men. Now, if you have a station in the file, not in the worst rank of manhood, say it, and I will put that business in your bosoms, whose execution takes your enemy off, grapples you to the heart and love of us, who were our health but sickly in his life, which in his death were perfect. So it's a repetition of what he was saying already. Yeah, you go for men. You appear to be men. But are you willing to go further and to extinguish this life? It would please me were Banquo to be assassinated. The second murderer says, I am one, my liege, whom the vile blows and buffets of the world hath so incensed that I am reckless what I do to spite the world. So the second murderer says, I'm exhausted, I'm fatigued by the world, I'm beaten down by the world, and so I am ready to pretty much do what you command me. And the first murderer, and I another, so weary with disasters, tugged with fortune, that I would set my life on any chance to mend it or be rid on it. So there's an apathy among these murderers, and they're willing to commit this crime to hurt or to kill Banquo, which is what actually Macbeth is suggesting here. He wants to use these men to extinguish the life of Banquo, because Banquo, who is his brother in arms and one of his best friends, he needs to be extinguished because he was witness to the prophecies, and he's also the father of kings to come. So for that reason, he needs to be extinguished. So we're seeing a colossal departure here. This is Act 3, Scene 1. A couple of scenes ago, we saw this great moral man, absolutely grappling with the idea of killing the king. Since then, he's gotten a bit better at it. He's murdered the king, he's murdered 2 innocent chamberlains, and now he is conspiring against his best friend. Macbeth repeats, "Both of you know Banquo was your enemy." And the murderer is, "True, my lord." So he's manipulating these guys. Macbeth says, "So is he mine, and in such bloody distance that every minute of his being thrusts against my nearest of life. And though I could, with barefaced power, sweep him from my sight and bid my will avouch it, so I could easily just get rid of him myself, yet I must not. For certain friends that are both his and mine, whose loves I may not drop, but wail his fall, who I myself struck down." So I can't, politically it wouldn't be expedient. I need to keep my friends, and we have friends in common, so it can't be me that does it. So he's really establishing the beginning of a reign of terror here, and he's putting murderers in to do this job for him. And thence, "It is that I, your assistants, do make love, masking the business from the common eye for sundry weighty reasons." So for very important reasons, I just can't be the one who murders Banquo, but I do need him killed. Second murderer says, "We shall, my lord, perform what you command us." And the first murderer says, "Though our lives," Macbeth says, "your spirits shine through you. Within this hour at most, I will advise you where to plant yourselves, acquaint you with the perfect spy of the time, the moment on it, for it must be done tonight." So he's absolutely feeling like this is an urgent thing. He must have Banquo killed tonight. It's urgent. And you can see how the cogs of paranoia are starting to turn, and he needs to eliminate this great friend of his, a man who he's been through an awful lot with. "The moment on it, for it must be done tonight. And something from the palace always thought that I require a clearness, and with him to leave no rubs nor blotches in the work." So to not make any, mistakes in the work. Underline this. "Fleance, his son that keeps him company, whose absence is no less material to me than his father's." So Fleance is to be murdered as well. You'll recall earlier, Macbeth was very inquisitive about Banquo's ride for the afternoon, his horse taking, and he asked at the very end, "Goes Fleance with you?" So of course, Fleance is Banquo's heir, and now Macbeth, full of tyranny here, asking these murderers to kill the innocent son of Banquo. This is a new departure. This is completely callous, to kill a young boy for fear that at some point he may be the King of Scotland. "That keeps him company, whose absence is no less material to me than his father's, must embrace the fate of that dark hour." So Fleance must embrace the fate of this death as well. "Resolve yourselves apart, I'll come to you anon." The murderers, "We are resolved, my lord." And Macbeth, "I'll call upon you straight, abide within. It is concluded. Banquo, thy soul's flight, if it find heaven, must find it out tonight." So traditionally, Act 3 is always a turning point in a Shakespearean play. And we have quite the turning point here. We have gone from seeing Macbeth grapple in terror at the idea of killing his king, to now very simply proposing to extinguish the life of Banquo and his young innocent son Fleance. This is really, really a new departure for him. And what is really, really important is that Lady Macbeth is nowhere to be seen. She is simply not on the stage. She's not in his decision-making process, and she is not his partner of greatness at this moment. He is going solo in these decisions. His murdering of the Chamberlains was done alone, and now this. So we are seeing that the partnership of greatness, which was so solidified and so strong at the beginning, is now falling apart. And Macbeth is working as a solo agent, commanding these murderers and establishing himself as a tyrant. Anyone that doesn't please him is going to face murder. Banquo is his friend, but because he is the father of potential kings to come, according to the witches, he must be murdered with his young innocent son. And he's now enlisting the help of murderers, I mean really, really immoral creatures, to get the job done. So he is unrecognisable to us from the great man who was depicted in Act 1, Scene 2 and Act 1, Scene 3, Act 1, Scene 4, when he was bestowing his loyalty on the King of Scotland. He now is the King of Scotland, but he is lacking any of the moral fibre of his predecessor.